Hi, parents. I'm Kim Botto. I lead Kids Club and Student Ministry, and this is...
I'm Chris Stewart. I'm part of the Kids Club National Team. I lead strategy, and I'm also part of creating resources for kids and families.
Because we're in the middle of a series called The Blessed Life that is all about generosity and how being generous really enables us to live a blessed life.
Yeah.
And this is something that we want to talk to our kids about now, no matter what their age is. Chris is a parent. He has Miles, who is,
He's almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
So
And-
not quite at the age of having tons of conversations, but the basics of sharing, of saying thank you, that's what we're trying to teach right now.
Yeah, and I'm a mom too. I have 5 kids, and I think all parents would agree that they want to raise kids who are generous. And we want to be generous because that's what God tells us to in the Bible. Over and over again, we're reminded to give to others and to do for others because that's what God has done for us. God gives to us and blesses us. Another reason that we want our kids to be generous, if we just look at science, being generous is good for you. Did you know that science has actually shown research, like real science? People who are more generous have lower blood pressures.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And people who are generous, when they rank contentment, people who are more generous are more content. So we want that for our kids too. And I'll just say, after years of working with kids are capable of so much more than we think they are, especially in terms of generosity. And I know you were considering a verse that really spoke to you on this.
It's actually very easy to remember. It's Exodus 13, 14, 15. And what I find in this are 3 kind of pieces of how to tell a story. Kids love stories, and kids can grasp a story a little bit better than concepts sometimes. It says, and when in time your son asks you, what does this mean? Talking about giving up the first animal or the first fruits. You shall say to him, by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt, from the house of slavery. For when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that first open the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons I redeem. Now, there's 3 parts of this, and I'll just address the first one. I don't own livestock, so I don't know that I'm going to be slaughtering a firstborn animal anytime soon. When I read this is the principle of the tithe. This is the principle of the first fruit, or the first giving, the tithe.
Right.
And so it says, when in time to come your son asks you, I mean, my son is young, like we said, but in time to come, he'll ask me. He'll be looking at a bank statement maybe, or maybe I'll be putting something in a bag at church or something. And he'll ask me, why are we doing this? Like, why do we give to the church? Why do we give outside of our family? And I need to have an answer. This tells me I need to have an answer to that. And there are 3 parts to that answer. The first part is I was a slave. I was in slavery. Me personally, I was a slave to selfishness, to my own self-image, different addictions. And depending on his age, I might, simplify some of that language. But the point is, I was a slave. The second point is God saved me. He rescued me from those things, where now I'm on a different path. There's freedom, there's goodness, there's love in my life that wouldn't be there. Really, everything that's good in my life comes from Jesus. And then the third part is therefore. Therefore, I gladly sacrifice. But it's out of gratitude. It's not out of trying to atone for anything or out of guilt. It's out of gratitude. So those are the 3 pieces that I'd say, as we invite you parents to talk to your kids, sometimes telling a story like that is easier for a kid to understand.
It's much more effective than a lecture.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
And as we tell our stories of where we were before Jesus, what you would tell Miles or what you would tell him when he's a preschooler is much different than what I would tell my 24-year-old.
Sure. For me, like when Miles gets to a point of 3 or 4 years old, I imagine he'll understand basic concepts like right or wrong, or rules and breaking rules. So maybe I could just leave it as simple as that. Like, Daddy was not making good choices. He was making wrong choices. But God rescued me from that. Now I still make mistakes. I don't want him to think I'm perfect, but I'm on a different path.
I also think sometimes when we're talking about generosity, especially when we're talking about tithing, often what we do is we invite our kids into the sacrifice. Like, hey guys, we're going to start tithing, so no longer are we going to have movie nights on Friday.
Sure.
Because we can't afford it. No longer are we going to eat out after church. Instead, we're going to come home and we're going to have peanut butter jelly sandwiches. I think kids need to be aware of sacrifices that we're making, but really what we're doing is we're inviting them in to the blessing of giving to others and understanding that everything good that we have comes from God. And because of that, we want to bring those things back to Him. And an example of that would be our two youngest daughters are adopted. And when we made the decision to adopt, we really didn't have all the financial resources that we needed to adopt. So we made some choices, and we talked to the kids about the choices we were making. And one of them was we drove a van until it was really old and didn't have any shocks. I mean, no shocks.
Oh, no.
And the brakes were not good. And what happened in the midst of that, our community came around us and they actually took our van for a day, and somebody had access to the parts that we needed. Somebody else had the skills to fix it.
Oh, wow.
And they gave our van back with new shocks and new brakes. So our kids got to see how God provides through community, and they got to see the blessings that come from driving an old van and getting a couple new sisters.
So, parents, what we want to do is we want to invite you into a chance to have this conversation with your kids. Wherever you're at with tithing or generosity or just the concept of sharing or giving, begin to have that conversation with kids. Make sure it's age appropriate.
And share stories of generosity. I remember at my dad's funeral, I heard so many stories that people would tell me that my dad had apartment buildings and they got to live there and not pay rent because they were going through a whole time. I didn't know that.
Wow.
Or times where people were having really big financial difficulties and my dad helped them. I would have loved to have had the opportunity to talk with him about why he chose to do it. So parents, I just encourage you to share those stories. Sometimes as parents, we feel like if we tell our kids about a time that we were generous or did something for somebody, it sounds like bragging.
Oh, sure, that like, oh, this is about me.
That's right.
Yeah.
But actually it's training. If we're trying to model what it looks like to live a life following Jesus and to model a heart that's generous, we model it, but then we also talk about it. So share those stories with those kids. Tell them how you felt when you gave to somebody else. Talk about ways that God then blessed you.
I think that's also good for those of us who give online or who automatically give. It's convenient, but often it's unseen. You know, that's what my family does, and so I'm already trying to think, what are ways we can make that more tangible, and as my son gets older, bring him along and show him where that money's going and all that.
You know, that's a great question, because I've had parents ask me, they say we have automatic, our tithe automatically taken out each month. And one of the things, kids are used to screens. We can pull that screen up and have them, we can show them on our screen, look guys, yesterday we had this money taken out and it's going back to the church because that's what God has instructed us to do and because it's God's money. So we're bringing it back to Him.
It's sort of like the updated version of writing the check.
Yeah.
And explaining it that way.
So parents, we're looking forward to hearing your stories of generosity and how you and your family are really stepping out in faith and being generous to others because of what God has done for us.
Thank you.